So, welcome back to What Makes a Difference. And today, I decided that I was going to do the intro because normally I leave it up to you, don't I, Rich?
You do.
And given the topic of our conversation today, I thought that was probably quite pertinent because our topic is showing up. So you and I were having a conversation about that before we started recording.
Yeah, and we're talking about veteran space in general. And how one guy, he's gone away to have a meeting with the PM, a whole host of charities and organisations.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a lot of grief for it. But the point being is they're there to do something positive for the veteran community. And what he's saying within his post is there's a perception with some people is professional victimhood.
Hmm.
So that's what we're discussing really, is how do we show up in the world? How are we perceived by others? What do we do to help ourselves? And at times, obviously, we do need assistance from others. But part of that post was about is people have done this, they've gone off to go and get help and support with certain things. But when they've gone for that help, the help hasn't been forthcoming. They've been denied that support and that assistance. So they've gone around, screw it, why should I bother?
Yeah, and I think you and I both work with people who've experienced that.
Yeah.
Where
justify outrage and a sense of injustice.
Yeah, and I think outrage is a really good word to use there, but there's also a sense of resentment that goes with that, and embitterment that says,
well, there's sanctuary trauma, isn't there? There's betrayal trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where your expectations haven't been met, where you've done your part, or you've done what you think is your part. Because sometimes that's also about the treatment not matching your needs because the wrong questions are asked.
Yeah, yeah.
But part of that showing up then, because as you and I were talking, what I'd kind of put out there was, do you think this is also sometimes a part of that transition challenge? That sometimes that's also about the skills that we don't yet have, that we don't know where to start with. So if you're coming from a community where you're used to all of that being provided and done and the guidance being there and being very clear in black and white, and all of a sudden none of that's there, how do you know where to start?
Well, there's also is the Kubler-Ross model, isn't there? Where these people, after that transition, they could be right at that bottom of that dip. They're not able to work out where they are or what's going on around them. So when they are offered help, it's like, what are you going to help me with? I'm in such a bad place. I can't cope. I'm not wanting to partake in these activities or this help because I can't see how you are helping me.
I think, is that maybe also that sometimes, don't get me wrong, there are choices to be made there. There's always choices to be made. And that choice is how you are showing up. But there's also an element in there which is about,
how does the other show up as well?
How does the other show up? And how do you, it's almost like I have to learn how to show up. So can you show me how to show up? It's like being willing to jump in the hole and go, here, let me give you a hand up. Grab my hand and I'll show you how to do this.
Yeah, well, there's that video, isn't there, about empathy. And they talk about the mental health first aid training, isn't it? It's shown on there, where sympathy is putting down the ladder, going, hey, how you doing? No. Yeah, where empathy is getting in that hole with that person.
Well, I think sympathy keeps you there. Empathy and compassion kind of get you out, because that means that somebody's willing to show you how to get out of that hole. But at some point in that, you have a choice to make over whether you then do what you have been shown.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to show up.
Well, that's about self-empowerment then. Taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm. I think that's also sometimes about what we choose. So if I go back to that sanctuary trauma piece, part of the conversation you and I were having was about change readiness. Now, sometimes I get very frustrated when I see people that work in the mental health sphere, and it's almost like there's that judgment of, well, if you're not change ready, I won't, if you're not at threshold, I won't work with you.
Yeah.
I'm not quite in that agreement with that, because if you're not at threshold, maybe you don't know how to get to threshold, and maybe actually what I need to do is start to show you, start to enable you to get to threshold so you can start to make different choices, so you can start to show up.
Yeah. And there's one particular person I know, he went away to a mental health organisation, and this guy was quite heavily drinking. And they asked him about his drinking, he said yes. So with that, they said, we're not going to take you on. Even though he is sober for a lot of the time. But just because of that drink, they won't take him.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of providers are like that. It's almost like you reach.
We're here they're saying we're here for you, but you have to meet our criteria first. And so where's the help they get to meet that criteria? There isn't any, or very limited. Well,
quite often sobriety is a major stumbling block for a lot of people in getting that help. Now, for me, it always
that's all patterns, isn't it? That's patterns of behaviour, and it's doing. It's not the actual process of doing the drinking or whatever the habit is. It's I'm going to go and get that thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but I also think there's another element in there, in that conversation between the provider and the person seeking the support. And that's what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Because quite often, if there's a dependence, or if there is a repeating behaviour that is a blocker, the question is what's the cause? So my approach to that has always been, fine, well, let's negotiate a window of sobriety where I can work with you, because there's no point trying to do any work if somebody's under the influence of anything, because at the end of the day, it won't stick. No. The person's not fully engaged in that process.
Yeah.
But sometimes that work has to start before that sobriety is fully established, in order to fully establish the sobriety.
Well, what happened after a period of time anyway is they'll end up becoming more and more sober as a result of that initial start. It's just about having that support, having that someone there for them, I think.
Yeah, and I think if that window of sobriety can be achieved, don't get me wrong, there are some situations where that's just not possible, at which point then something else has to happen first to get to that point. It's almost that assessment, that conversation that says, what comes first to enable the rest? What's the starting point to help you show up? And that's unique for each person.
Definitely.
But again, I'm going to circle back to that resentment, embitterment, and the sanctuary trauma, that betrayal. Because sometimes what there is a labeling of people. And again, that's sometimes a misinterpretation of signals. So people get labelled as difficult, problematic, disengaging, when what they are is betrayed, hurt, and probably get by that point slightly disbelieving
Mm-hmm.
And trusting of the fact that anybody's going to follow through in their actions and their commitments. At which point, why would you show up?
Or you show up how you know,
Or you
isn't it?
show up when you know.
Mm.
Because those responses become defense mechanisms to prevent further letdown, further betrayal,
Yeah.
further trauma. So what if showing up is a two-way street?
Well, it's got to be, hasn't it? Well, you could be the greatest therapist in the world, but if you've got nobody at your door, then you can't do anything to help people. And likewise, that person who needs the help, they got to recognise it as well.
I'm going to go back to threshold, because threshold for me then isn't necessarily about the cynicism, the anger, sometimes the betrayal you get, the disbelief that anything's going to change. It's, are they actually still there? Are they choosing to still ask, even if they don't believe it's going to happen? That asking still is showing up.
Yeah. Well, threshold isn't when the typical thing would be a smoker comes in because the husband or the wife has said, I want you to stop smoking.
Yeah.
And the chances of the success in that are going to be nil.
Well, the motivation's sitting in the wrong channel, isn't it?
Yeah. You're doing it for somebody else rather than for yourself.
Mm-hmm. It's showing up then.
But then showing up, so the person who has been betrayed, who has been let down, and all those other things that go along with that, they've still turned up, they've still shown up, and they're still there wanting that help and support. So still willing to risk other avenues, still willing to risk further hurt, further betrayal, and disappointment to get that help.
Well, that means that those emotions that sometimes are perceived as negative, as problematic, comes back to that defense mechanism again, isn't it? It's almost like a signal that says, well, I could reframe that to say that those behaviours are a very subtle way of saying, don't let me down.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't be another one. But there is almost also an element of can't be arsed in the community sometimes, in any community.
Oh, yeah. And not only can't be asked is going for handouts or going to get things when they're ridiculous. So a friend of mine, excuse me, he was called out by an organisation to say, can you go and get some money for this guy to do his activity? And is that, it was to do with water sports. And is that, he had to travel 3-4 hours to go and visit this person who's more than capable of doing that themselves, but they just wanted that thing to go, oh, it's affecting my mental health, so I can't go out and do my activity. Is that, you're ridiculous, you're taking a piss. I could have been helping 3 or 4 other people in that time space when you're asking for something that's really stupid.
Yeah.
So there's people out there who do abuse the system.
Yeah, I think that exists in every community.
Absolutely, yeah.
But there's also a huge amount of people that show up time after time who might have a history of being let down time after time, who when the next time they show up might not show up as if they are really showing up, but that's actually what's happening. They're just really defensive.
Yeah.
They're primed to prevent a further hurt. Or they don't know where to start because they've never been shown.
Or somebody started them off in the wrong place.
Yeah. Maybe it's lots of false starts that have impacted their belief in their capacity to show up and their capacity to make the right choice. And there's a bit of self-belief building that needs to go on there to actually enable that showing up, that self-reliant showing up.
They're partly part of that is all about identity, beliefs, values,
Very much.
and how they can change or where they're sat at the moment to where they need to be.
How we show up also shapes what we get in response. I remember having a conversation when I was in HR working in manufacturing, and I had this factory general manager I was working with who was very frustrated with her trade unions at the time. And they said to me, I've just decided I'm just going to go to the trade union meeting. I'm just going to tell them I'm fed up with this, and that's it. I'm done. And this is. They just need to get their act together. My response to that was, interesting. Can I ask what it is you want to achieve with that? Because if it's a positive outcome, I'm not sure that's the way to do it. But you will get a response. Because how were they showing up? They were showing up in battle mode. They were showing up in antagonist.
It's my way or the highway, isn't it?
Yeah. And as a result, how they were showing up would shape the response of the people in the room.
Yeah.
So we have choices to make about that too. How we show up.
Yeah, it's very cool. Even before it starts, already causing friction.
Are we anticipating that, going in prime for it, and therefore almost creating the situation that delivers on that?
Yeah. So that goes to the Bataris Box. So for those who don't know, it's my attitude, my behavior affects your attitude, affects your behavior. And then that can go down very, very quickly into anger, arguments, conflict.
Well, that's probably because a lot of people respond to the surface communication, not the one. They don't stop long enough to pause and go, what's really going on here? They don't stop to pause to go, if I look at the context of your experiences so far, because they might not have that. They might not have that context.
Well, a lot of people would be mind reading, won't they? So in the case of your manager, that general manager, he may have gone, I'm fed up with unions. I've had enough of them already. I'm sick to the back teeth of them. And goes wading straight in. But then that's already got people's backs up.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, to a certain extent, I got where they were coming from, 100%, because at that point, the unions were resolving everything, no matter how big or how small, with a letter of grievance. And that meant that we were literally getting like 10, 15 a week easily.
That's not helpful.
No, and it didn't achieve anything. We resolved it by sitting down and going, what is it you want to achieve? Is your current strategy working for you? Have you achieved what you set out to? No, well, let's change the strategy. What can we do differently? That applies in those situations about showing up and what you bring into that. But I think, again, there's a timing thing there.
Yeah. And potentially the two people who are, so the person who wants to help and support and the person who is there to help them, they may not just be compatible anyway, no matter what happens and how that's provided.
Is this also about trust and building trust?
Don't know.
Well, if we take the scenario where you've got sanctuary betrayal trauma there, what you've got is a breach of trust.
Yeah.
If that's been consistently broken, then in order for you to have faith that a different response and a different way of showing up will get something else, you have to still trust.
Well, that person is showing up anyway who has that betrayal. They're still putting an element of trust in going up and showing up.
That's also about the choices, isn't it, and decisions.
What's the expectations? Are they being met? So if somebody's going, right, I want that help and support, they're expecting that help and support. Then if somebody's not providing it, again, it's that letdown, it's that sense of betrayal.
Are those expectations themselves sometimes an issue?
It will be, yeah. Maybe they're expecting too much.
I suppose when everything is difficult.
Everything's difficult.
Or when it feels like everything is difficult. Managing your expectations is kind of which one do you pick to fix first. So I suppose it's only natural in a way to want it all fixed, because that's the easier choice or request to make than picking just one.
Again, it's that potential, as go back, mentioned earlier, false starts. So I pick that one, or pick these ones and these ones, but they're too many. They can't cope with them. There's too much going on.
It's a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? Start at the bottom and work your way up. So you secure your environment, you secure your financials, your basic survival needs, and then you work up from there. Because until those are sorted, you really don't have the headspace for anything else.
No. Well, I've worked previously with an organisation, and I was part of a whole group, but all these guys were getting a whole host of all the other people coming in to do other stuff with them. And I can't deal with you. I can't deal with you because it's just too much for me. Instead of having one point of contact to help that person, that individual, it was just agency after agency after agency. That completely overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, how do you track all of that when you're already, your brain and your working processing and your capacity for decision making is already compromised because of the amount of pressure and stress you're under?
Your favourite thing, Annie? Databases and spreadsheets.
They're not my favourite thing.
Second favourite thing?
No. They're a functional tool and that's it. They're not my favourite thing. A good mind map's my favourite thing.
But it's difficult without having a process or something in place to go, oh, I've got this going on, I've got that going on, and all that going on, where does it all fit in that bigger scheme?
Pacing. How'd you climb a mountain, Rich?
Well, you're trekking from the bottom. You plan it first. Plan what supplies and everything you need, what support's there, the routes, the journey to.
Strikes me as the reason that
any guides, any Sherpas, any guides, things like that.
Well, it strikes me that there's a reason that Everest has a base camp.
That's to acclimatise, isn't it? Partly.
So to acclimatise.
Rest.
An organisation. Rest. Because there's a journey to get to base camp. There's preparations to be made to get to base camp.
Well, you know the time that most people die on Everest?
No, but you're going to tell me, aren't you?
Yeah, it's when they've got to the top and they're coming down, they get complacent. That sense of euphoria, oh, I've reached the top, I've got the pinnacle.
Yeah.
I didn't pay attention to anything else.
So showing up then, is it about establishing your base camp?
Or was that planning everything beforehand to get there? Because you can't just rock up to a base camp, can you?
No.
You need a team, supplies, route, tent. warm gear.
This could be a very long list, Rich.
Could well be. I was going to stop there anyway. But you do. There's a whole host of elements that go in to that before you get to the base camp.
But there's one essential.
You.
Yeah. And the decision to do it. To start. Okay. Anywhere. Just start. And sometimes that start can be finding somebody that can guide you. Finding your guide.
Somebody's done it. Well, somebody's done it before, isn't it?
Somebody who's done it before.
And they can jump in that pit with you.
They can start to teach you how to show up. To show you how to show up. Because you're still going to have to climb the mountain.
Yeah, or piggyback on somebody else. They may not. They may not like it.
I don't think they will. No.
No.
So it comes back to that attitude, then, isn't it? I suppose it's what you want from life. Some people, they can't be arsed. Just want what they've got there, and they want it with as little effort as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those just don't know where to start, where to find their guide.
And that guide may not have your best intentions at heart either.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe they've forgotten how to want more.
Needs, wants, likes, and wishes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So showing up, it's a complex thing.
There's a question then. Showing up for you is like what? That's a question to the listeners.
Well, the question I would ask is, how are you showing up? And how is how you're showing up influencing what you get in return? What signals are you sending? What's your takeaways, Rich?
I was going to ask you the same. Takeaways are attitude. So the Bataris Box, your attitude, your behaviour is affecting somebody else's attitude and their behaviour. What can you do to change that? So you may have met someone and you're like, oh my God, not that person again. But they may be there to help you. And likewise, that person who is coming through that door to help you, they may go, oh God, not him again or her again. So those two people have to change how they're perceiving the other person.
My turn?
Yeah, your turn.
Assumptions. Sometimes we make assumptions about what we think when we see someone show up, and we misinterpret the showing up.
Well, you know what to say about assumptions? Or assuming things?
No, what? Tell me. I'm expecting something really enlightening here. Go for it.
Well, sure you are. Making an ass out of you and me, isn't it? Or assuming is a mother of all fuck-ups.
Mother of all fuck-ups, yeah.
Yes. So if you would like any help and support, or you'd like to work with us on a commercial basis, then please do get in contact.
And in the meantime, we hope you enjoyed the episodes. Feel free to follow and like, and you can find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and a whole host. Oh, YouTube. Can't forget YouTube. And on Facebook too. So please do follow, like, and share. Any questions, stick them in the comments.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for listening to all those people all around the world, new and old.
And yeah, have a think. How are you showing up?